This is DJ Fallout, and you're listening to Vaquero Radio. Good morning, Vaqueros. This is DJ Fallout, and this is the Fallout Shelter. Today, we're going to be talking about not only the music of our pandemic, but the hobbies of our pandemic. What we're doing to entertain ourselves, distract ourselves, and maybe even hurt ourselves a little during the course of this process. Here's Radio Song by REM. So that was Radio Song from REM, a little bit appropriate if you ask me. As DJs, we know that we reach a certain audience. So we're always aware of our reach, and that song kind of makes light of it. It's kind of talking about a breakup, and the radio that's playing in the background that keeps reminding one of the situation. So it's kind of an ironic song. Believe it or not, the rapper on that song, KRS-One, was never supposed to rap on it. He wrote the ending of the song after he played through the song so many times with the band. So that was REM. Now, the topic of our show today here at the Fallout Shelter is going to be the hobbies of the pandemic. Now, as an adult, I'm a non-traditional student, so I'm not a young kid. I've had plenty of hobbies. I believe in lifelong learning. Michelangelo on his deathbed famously said, "I am still not done learning." And I've always taken that to heart, that we should always be learning something. If not, we should be focusing on the things that we're already doing well to get better at them. It's called practice, right? So lifelong learning and a non-traditional student, that's my viewpoint. I've been able to have some opportunities to learn a lot more about myself. One of the ways we do that is, of course, through our hobbies or vocations. They can be a peek into a person's inner world. Take, for example, cosplayers. I know that's a little below my age, but cosplayers are, popular. It's a way for a person to express themselves kind of in the universe of an anime or a popular show, and it allows them to kind of, essentially show their fandom to that particular group or song or movie or anime. So that's kind of neat that you can learn about yourself through hobbies. Now, as an adult, of course, I've never been a cosplayer, but I have been a cyclist. I've been a drone pilot. I've been a videographer. I've been a podcaster most recently, sound geek forever, and a gamer. And it might surprise you how far back that goes. And that's all before the pandemic hit. I was doing this before all this happened. So finding all of this time on my hands, right, I've found myself wandering back to my old pastimes. For example, I haven't played guitar since the 4th grade. Yet, somehow, I am now trying to learn guitar via YouTube and, YouTube. I don't talk to anybody. I've also soldered piles of components together to build drones, like those racing drones you might see on ESPN. I've built those, and I've flown those at local parks. I just recently re-entered the university via the master's program for communications because ultimately, when I graduated in May of 2020, there weren't very many jobs available for communicators. The rules that we were following when it comes to verbal, nonverbal communication, face-to-face comms, were rewritten overnight. We're stuck now in ever-ending Zoom meetings and this kind of little tunnel of a view that we don't really get the full intention of a conversation anymore. Only because we're so limited in terms of the bandwidth that we're receiving when we're talking to another human. So all of this effect on me as a graduate, I kind of sat there to myself and said, okay, well, you know what? Let's go find something to do. So podcasting is part of it. Me volunteering here at Vaquero Radio is also part of it. Thank you, UTRGV, for allowing me the opportunity to do that. The Fallout Shelter, of course, is dedicated to understanding how we're all coping, right? And telling stories that highlight our humanity. I mean, none of us are perfect, and we all fall from time to time, and we're all here together. So we're all a little bit like Tom Hanks, like Castaway. We're in our own little bubbles, sealed up, and we need human contact. So it can be relieving once in a while to know what other people are doing to cope. So throughout the show, we'll be talking a little bit more about the things that I've done and things that I am doing to kind of distract myself from the situation, because it can be rough for everybody. I completely understand it. Meanwhile, here's another song, one of my favorites. We'll talk about this at the end of it. It's called Beast by Nico Vega. Enjoy. All right, so that was Beast by Nico Vega. That's the extended version. That's the only one that we could find that was clean, but it's a really powerful song nonetheless. Now, I first discovered this song, believe it or not, playing a video game. The video game was called BioShock Infinite, and it discussed issues of jingoism, extreme patriotism, nationalism, racism, and the intersection. What occurs when those ideas are taken to their fullest extent. So this particular game really did strike me. It's one of the few games I've actually played the entire way through more than once, because what it had to say was kind of telling. It says that if we're focused on the red, white, and blue at the expense of everything else and accepting that we are superior, then by default, that puts everybody else that you deal with at a disadvantage. Very simply, you're a racist because you believe these things. It is a simple thing. I mean, video games are not subtle, so sometimes they have to make very obvious statements. But this one was pretty well done, because it went through the entire game talking about the intersection of nationalism and extreme patriotism and what that would mean for a culture if they blindly accepted these truths. So it was pretty touching for me as a not so young adult to play through, and reflecting on the events, January 6th and back. Reflecting on those events makes me understand that we can follow anything off a cliff, anything at all, whether it's patriotism, whether it's a person, whether it's an idea, whether it's a formula. It doesn't matter. It can be science, it can be philosophy, it can be art. We can go down wrong pathways. We can go down wrong lanes. It happens to us all. So, having said all that, what is music, right, have to do with the current situation? Well, if you reflect back to way back, that is, your parents' time, the 60s, music made a lot of a difference. It made a lot of difference, in fact. Songs like The Times They Are Changing, for example, from Bob Dylan, had a deep effect on the national conscience. They were trying to get out of a war. Part of the country didn't want to be in the war. The other country certainly wanted to be. And there was a discussion being had in the form of protest all over the nation about that. We're in a very similar situation today. Ultimately, the protests are more now for the one particular political ideology versus another. It's no longer whether the president won or not. But is it really changed much? We're united. That's the first word of our name, the United States of America. We're Americans first, in my opinion, and I firmly believe that by listening to music together, by talking about music, by critiquing music, I think we can go ahead and step past this. It's one of the many ways that we can do this. It's a form of discussion. So I want to continue kind of having these discussions about the songs that we hear, that remind us of better times, of our pasts, of how we get through. So coming up next is a song by AC/DC, Thunderstruck. Now, we've all heard this song a million times, but you may not know where I heard it. Okay, the first time I heard this song was in 1991 on the deck of a ship called the USNS Chauvenet. It was pulled up alongside of a battleship, the USS Iowa. It was there for Desert Storm. I was there for the original Desert Storm. And we pulled up alongside to do an exercise called underway replenishment. This is a fancy way of saying that ship A is going to give ship B some stuff, and we're going to use wires to do it. So essentially, these two ships pull up alongside, they tie up alongside each other while they're moving, and start moving stuff. Okay, and it's a dangerous evolution. It is hard to do. It's scary. It honestly, the first time I ever did it, it was terrifying. But the coolest part of all is when you're done and everybody's exhausted and the last box is off the deck and everything is on the other side, is every ship, and this is an unofficial thing in the Navy, gets a breakaway song. Now, my ship was a research vessel, so we weren't, militarily ready for any of this. So our breakaway song was King of the Road. um, okay. It's an old song that you may or may not know, but essentially it's about a wandering bum. And so that was our song. Now, the mighty Iowa, with its 16-inch guns, you've seen this ship in Battleship. And in fact, they recreated this in the movie. Its breakaway song, because of its guns, is Thunderstruck by AC/DC. And if you ever watch the movie Battleship, you'll see kind of a recreation of that. They play the song as they get ready to fire. When they pull away from underway replenishment, they play the song too, just as a reminder that those big guns are used for something. So this is the first time I ran into that song. It always reminds me of that day, and it's a pretty pump song on top of it. So here's Thunderstruck by AC/DC. Welcome back, guys. Thanks for listening. So I was going to talk about some of the hobbies that I've had, have, and am having during the pandemic. I've already talked about a little bit about, being a gamer. I've talked about being a podcaster. Most people that know that I've been a cyclist for almost my whole life. I was, as soon as I could learn to ride a bike, I never stopped. So as an adult, that gives you kind of a certain viewpoint. I mean, because we're all familiar as kids, right, with that less than ideal bicycle that we received for Christmas. It was heavy, it was colorful, and it worked mostly, but it was never great, right? But as an adult, you get to kind of explore your options, and you can actually find something that works for your body and with the style of riding you want to do. I mean, we're all familiar, right, with lines of cyclists speeding down the frontage road or tearing by us as we walk by on a local trail, like Linear Park, for instance. God, I hate that sometimes. But we're also familiar with the bikes we get as kids, as I said. Colorful, heavy, poorly set up. So as an adult, you get the chance to explore those options and ride like we do in our dreams as kids. Free from gravity and effort, flying on the wind. It's awesome. Modern bicycles are built using materials that are found in aerospace. We're talking about carbon fiber, titanium, and other and other elements that there's some interesting aerospace alloys, for instance, that are being used to build bikes. These are common component materials now. And I'm not even talking about e-bikes yet. Those are electronic bikes or electric bikes that have motors that help you as you pedal. E-bikes are becoming more and more common, and they're also providing more people than ever with the opportunity to become self-powered. In other words, people that may not have the strength to push a bicycle down the street can now do it thanks to this e-bike technology. So, there is a long history of getting more and more people on bikes. If you go back to the beginning of bicycles with the safety bike, that was designed because some folks thought that the existing idea of the bicycle, which was called penny farthing at the time. This was a bicycle that you may have seen with a giant front wheel and a tiny back wheel. These things are inherently dangerous because if you stop, you fall. So there isn't a way to get close to the ground. In addition, if you do hit something with that big wheel, you're going to fly over the front wheel onto the ground. So obviously this is a problem. Okay. So as we've gotten to the 21st century and we're now almost a quarter of the way through it, I can only assure you that bicycle design has gotten better. Now, granted, it isn't as it's much better now than it was when I first started riding. My first time on a mountain bike hurt. I came back just basically a giant scab, and it was nobody's fault but my own. I fell down a few hills, and the hill took some skin off on the way. But I'll be honest, that was the first time I'd ever actually ridden a legitimate mountain bike on a legitimate trail somewhere. And what I do remember of it is having the time of my life. I was laughing. I had a smile on my face. And that experience that I had, maybe 25, 30 years ago, it was transformative. It gave me the sensation of riding through the woods like, Luke Skywalker in Star Wars and Return of the Jedi when he's flying through the woods on that little speeder bike. That's what it feels like, or it felt like to me for the first time. And once I had that sensation, I was hooked. And I continued to mountain bike throughout my military life and into civilian life. And now I ride the roads of Brownsville almost every day. Granted, that may be an exaggeration. I don't ride it nearly as much as I'd like to. But my thoughts and prayers are with my bicycle, which sits in my closet every single day. Now, I mentioned drone pilot earlier. I do want to talk a little bit about that because not everybody knows what drone pilots do or why the job even exists. So I do want to talk a little bit about that, but we'll talk about that after our next song. Just give me a second here while I'm looking for it. Let's see. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm just getting used to our playlist, which has been updated. Give me a moment. This is DJ Fallout, and you're listening to Vaquero Radio. All right, Vaqueros, welcome back to the show. So I mentioned drone pilot, and I'm sure some folks were a little bit intrigued by that. I've been a drone pilot since 2016 when I took an FAA exam and chose to go ahead and try it out for myself. I have flown rather, for the real estate, the mapping, and the legal industries. And that gave me some experience and allowed me to fly. It allowed me to see a lot of the state. Again, there was many industries. I build, fly, maintain drones for fun and enjoyment. My favorite ones are the ones that go 100 miles an hour. I don't know if you've seen these. They're on TV. There's a show called the Drone Racing League that shows how these things behave. I can build and fly these things. And to be honest, it's a disassociative state. When you fly a drone, you are seeing what the drone sees. So that allows you to kind of step away from your own body for a second, even virtually. And it takes away a lot of anxiety. It takes away a lot of physical pain even, because essentially you're inside that drone. You're the pilot. And that gives you a feeling that you are away from your body for a moment. So that's one of the reasons why I picked it up. And especially during the pandemic, I found that disassociative states, that is kind of stepping away from your own body and your own situation for a moment, can help, because we have to see this whole thing, right, through a bigger lens. Otherwise, what's the point? We need to be able to stand for our fellow man as much as we stand for ourselves. It's totally important to do. So yes, I have been a drone pilot, and I have been doing that through the pandemic. And the one that I've focused on, the one hobby that I've actually focused on the most since the pandemic started, is podcasting. This has been something of a saving grace for me. I've been told that I have a face for radio. Ha ha ha. That's an old joke, by the way. But after graduating with my BA in the middle of COVID, as I mentioned, I found the field for comm majors surprisingly thin. All of those lessons that we learned were rewritten overnight, and we have these endless Zoom meetings, emails, and texts. So I know I needed to keep learning and adapt. The question was how? Well, podcasting had that answer for me. I use an app called Anchor and my computer. So I set up a podcast. This app allows you to send it to up to 7 separate providers, including Apple Podcasts and others. And it gives you a worldwide reach. It gives anybody a worldwide reach. All you have to do is have something to say, because podcasting gives anybody a global platform to get a message out. The key to podcasting then is actually the message itself, because when it resonates with an audience, that audience grows, and you can provide additional opportunities and even potentially income potential. Now, I'm not saying I'm ever going to make money off of this, but a few folks do. So it's been something that I have been working towards. Being a DJ on the radio, or on internet radio, that is, does help as well. Now, when the technology works, it's awesome. Fallout Radio is my podcast. This is the Fallout Shelter. They are somewhat related. Fallout Radio, of course, is an homage to the Fallout games that I talked about last week, and it covers the intersection of national and local news in a way that highlights how we're affected as an area, as a culture, and as a state. So all of these things that happen on a national level, when Republicans and Democrats start talking about immigrants, or when they stop at McAllen instead of coming down to understand that the valley continues all the way down to here to Brownsville, all of these things that happen, podcasting gives you a platform to talk about. If you're mad, if you're sad, if you're happy, it doesn't matter. You can just kind of turn it on and record and put together something that other people might want to listen to. And you might be able to be a guide to somebody. You might also be a bad example of somebody. So podcasting is kind of an open book that anybody can get into and can start kind of messing with on their own. It's a great way to become more involved, because ultimately the way out of this craziness that we're in, it's through listening to each other, through understanding each other, and through providing your opinion in such a way that people have to listen. So podcasting is the way I do that. And in the spirit of crazy, here's Crazy Train by Ozzy.
Vaquero Radio is now available on the palm of your hand
with Radio FX. Download the Radio FX app to listen to your favorite DJs on the go.
For more information, go to utrgvradio.com.
Focus, you wanna say so.
All right, Vaqueros, welcome back to Vaquero Radio. This is DJ Fallout. Now, a little word about the news. According to the New York Times, their report card on the virus is actually getting better. The number of new coronavirus cases continues to plummet, as does the number of Americans hospitalized with symptoms. Deaths have also begun to decline, and the number of daily vaccination shots has nearly tripled over the last month. Now, this is per the New York Times. So it looks like we're improving. So you never know. I may not have a show after a while because we'll be post-pandemic. I doubt it. But it looks like the situation is still bad. The virus is spreading more rapidly in the U.S. than any other large country in the United States, in the world. We know that. And more than 2,500 Americans are dying every day. That's obviously almost a 9/11 per day. For now, though, things are getting better, and a combination of vaccinations, mask wearing, and social distancing has the potential to sustain recent progress. So it looks like we might be getting there. So I hate to break it to those that think that, the guy in charge has nothing to do with the pandemic, but it does look like it does. Biden's only been in office less than a month, and look where we're at now. So the virus report card looks better, according to what I'm seeing. As of it spiked on January 2nd, and on today, February 9th, actually 2 days ago, February 9th, it was down to 108,144 cases reported. So we're getting better slowly over time. That's good news. So I want to know, Vaqueros, what are you guys doing throughout the pandemic aside studying or not studying or staring at the wall and crying and listening to sad songs and talking to folks on WhatsApp? Aside from those things, what are we doing to make our little section of the world better for ourselves, for other people, for those that we care about, and for total strangers? Because ultimately we're all in this together, right? Whether we like it or not, our behavior affects others. It's just going to. That's the way it is. We are individuals. Truly, as Americans, we love our individuality. I understand. We all get that. But we must also understand that we are our brother's keeper, and we are beholden to our fellow man when it comes to their welfare. Not directly. Ultimately, everybody makes their own decisions. But we can make it so that our actions don't impact others negatively. Very simply. And that's what I think a lot of what's going on in politics right now is about. Consequence. There has to be a consequence for one's actions. If you were raised in a Christian household, if you were raised in an American household, we're raised under the idea that there are consequences for one's actions. We need consequence. The consequence of us not masking up and not listening to experts is putting the United States in jeopardy when it comes to COVID. So the continual cost of continuing to not pay attention to the experts, not masking up, is it really worth it? Even ultimately, the American people decided, right, by picking a new leader, that we needed to listen to somebody else. And I think moving forward from that, we're in a good place. As a country, we're doing much, much better than we were, as the reports do indicate. I could not feel better about that. Now, when it comes to my show, and when it comes to the Fallout Shelter, the music I play, nothing's going to change. We're still going to talk about inspirational songs. We're still going to talk about songs that put us in a place of peace and a place where we can kind of tie the lyrics to our reality, because that's what I'm doing here. We're just showing how music can be transformative, how music can change the way we think about a subject, and certainly it can improve our mood. So for all these reasons, I play some of these songs. I played Feel Good Inc. just because it's I'm sorry, not Feel Good Inc. Dare, because it's a great song from the Gorillaz, and it was actually the next one on my playlist. So in terms of getting back to the show, in terms of the hobbies that we've chosen for our pandemic, what are we doing? Are we? I don't know. I mean, there's a world of hobbies out there, right? Now, just ask Michaels. What are we doing? Are we doing good things for the world? Are we doing things for ourselves and our family? Are we hurting ourselves in any way? That can be through any form of abuse. Are we doing what's good for us, or are we doing what's not good for us? And so part of the songs I play, part of what we talk about has to do with that. It's all kind of linked in this big soup that we're going through. But hopefully on the other side of it, we'll be able to have a discussion about what we did to do it, to make it through this time, and how we can take those lessons and apply it to our everyday life. So here's some Red Hot Chili Peppers. This is DJ Fallout, and you're listening to Vaquero Radio. Okay, guys, time is now 11:58. It's 70 degrees outside and getting, we're going to say gray. There's drizzle. There's a little bit of wind. Looks like the cold front's finally made it to us. So thank you all for listening to me on this Thursday, February 11th. This is DJ Fallout, and this is the Fallout Shelter. Honestly, y'all, I am enjoying my time here with you, and it goes too fast. So thank you once again for listening. I'll be here next Thursday, 11 to 12, and I should be for the rest of the semester. So once again, thanks so much for indulging me. My name's DJ Fallout, and this is the Fallout Shelter.